and welcome to this, which is called the Making of Place language, writing from Hong Kong, the making of place and language. And we have invited Tammy Ho, who is going to moderate this event, and four very brilliant poets from Hong Kong, Akin Jeje, Marco Yan, and Felix Chow and Kate Rogers. But first of all, let me just say that our festival is happening this week and next week. So do try to come along if you can to the events and sign up through our Eventbrite links or through our social media, Facebook and so on. It would be lovely to have you engage with different writers and their works. So just wanted to introduce Tammy. Tammy is a very prolific editor, scholar, and writer. So she's the founding editor of Asian Cha, which is the leading magazine on Asian literature, and she's also professor in Baptist University, Hong Kong. And so she is also, hold on first. She is also involved in launching lots of literary events in Hong Kong and in Asia and in international, including the International Poetry Nights in Hong Kong. And I will let you also maybe let her introduce a bit of her work as well, and the other poets. So let's hand over the event to Tammy.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Can you all hear me? All right. Good. Welcome to Writing from Hong Kong, Language and Making of Place. My name is Tammy Ho Lai Ming. I am an editor of Cha, an Asian literary journal. And the event tonight is co-organized by Poetics of Home Festival, which is very, very exciting, and Cha. We have four featured poets tonight to speak to us, and I'm going to say a few words about them. First, we have Felix. Felix Chow is a third-year student in the University of Hong Kong, majoring in English studies and minoring in Hong Kong studies. We have Akin Jeje. His works have been published and featured in Canada, the United States, Singapore, Australia, the United Kingdom, and Hong Kong, and is also one of the key members of in the Hong Kong poetry scene. The third poet included in the program is Kate Rogers. Kate's work has appeared in numerous publications, and her latest collection is Out of Place. And we also have Marco Yan, who has earned his MFA degrees at Hong Kong U and NYU. Tonight, our event is called Poetics of Home. It is a part of Poetics of Home Festival, Writing from Home, Language and Making of Place. And before we start, I would like to say a little bit about what we are going to do. Our poets will read their works and also talk about their works for about 15 minutes. And they will also comment on each other's writing before we have a discussion with the audience member. Before we start that, however, I would like to read a poem. It is a new poem by a very important Hong Kong poet who is not able to join us tonight. Louise Ho. So she sent us a poem. I'm going to read it. Poem by Louise Ho. It's not a turn or two after supper, nor a round delay among friends. Shall we listen to the tremor of a drum beat and record its rhythm? Or together, let's storm and twirl the language, Sahara-like, as the sand and dust begin to slowly settle. Let's pluck from the air someone's thrush or another's spondy. Here be lamps, there dithyrambics, endlessly. So after that, I would like to invite our first poet to respond to tonight's discussion. We asked the questions: how does poetry reflect or redefine place in a cosmopolitan Hong Kong where East meets West? Who and what is local? What makes the city unique? Akin?
Good evening, everybody. And to answer that, let me give a little bit of background. I've lived in Hong Kong for 16 years, but I came here as an adult. And I think, in my view, it's more of a reinterpretation of what is place. I believe that you're local once you've made a certain investment to be in Hong Kong and to be a part of Hong Kong. And the places I've lived in Hong Kong, like Yuen Long, like Kowloon City, like To Kwa Wan, these are not considered expat areas or expat enclaves. They're very much urban Hong Kong. But I always am aware that, number one, even though I have basic Cantonese, I don't have the same experiences as poets like Marco or poets like Felix, who were born and raised here and therefore have a very different perspective of the same Hong Kong that we all inhabit. And Kate, who had lived here for a long time, also would have perhaps more of a similar perspective, like myself. But at the same time, there's being local and then there's being local. So for us, it's often a reinterpretation of place or an observation of place as we see it from a very different perspective. And I'd like to start off with a poem that I wrote when I was first in Yuen Long in 2006, 2007. One thing about Hong Kong that's always been remarked is its fabulous transportation system. You can take the MTR, the minibuses, the taxis, but there's a special thing in the northwest part of the New Territories called the LTR, the light rail transit, that is unique to that area. And this is something I experienced. But also living in certain parts of Hong Kong that are not exactly on the tourist track, you get to see everyday Hong Kong sort of in an unvarnished way. And you see the beauty of it and you see the struggle in it. And so this first poem is called Brother and Sister. Evening chill on the LTR. In the mist of a river of sunken eyes, a bed of hard set faces against the unforgiving exhaustion this night, two stood above the uncaring current, stunningly alight. He, little cherub, maybe 4'3", deep set gaze in the embrace of his round, pebble smooth, glazed marble cheeks, his grubby school bag, ashen trousers and shirt tails, garlanding his unhindered joy. She, tall and wan, off-white uniform threadbare, hair pulled and severe that did not restrain the glorious of her crooked smile, the missing molar, a gateway for her delight as they pinched and played and laughed and teased, heedless of the unsmiling mouths, the shrouded brows. Only 2 stops, jostling and clanging down the neon and grit of Castle Peak Road. But a lesson for the undead and simple glee, glimpse of eternity. Doors open, they left, striding arm in arm, bright minnows, back to their warm stream, from the river of sunken gazes, the bitter set faces, then tattoos, glasses, and piercings, frowns, and scowls entered and sat in their places. Now, I don't want to make it sound like it was all doom and gloom and it was only these particular children that had this spark of joy. But on that particular train, you got that feeling, one got that feeling that for ordinary Hong Kongers, the dawn to dusk slog is not easy, but children still can retain, this sense of joy, this sense of hope, this sense of, simple play that sort of offsets the struggle so many others, have to endure. And it's not uniform, obviously, but again, we as poets can only take snapshots of what we see, what we perceive, what we observe. We're not going to be, omniscient. We're not going to be able to see, quote unquote, anything and everything there is to see about a place. But the things that we see make up a mosaic of what we understand. And again, transport in Hong Kong is a fabulous place to observe people. And I saw something else somewhere a little further away on the island around Tin Hau. And it was just a marvelous little vignette that I captured in this one. At first, I untitled it, but then I later called this one Mother and Child. As the voluminous serpent of the Sheng Wan Island line skated its steel slither past the crush of Admiralty, throngs of Wan Chai, mobs of Causeway Bay towards the quieter groves of Central Library, Tin Hau branch, I finally saw something good tonight. Previous stop, diminutive mother, cherub son, amidst the sullen retiring mass, squeeze, last mice into an overflowing maw when the jaw-like doors snapped right at their heads. And of course, to the resounding indifference of the devoured horrors, she took instant feral flight. But in that moment of near mastication, she gained much more than that. With a rare, serene grace, she withdrew, regained a now empty place under the station's fluorescent light. And as the serpent began to careen away in search of a more satisfying bite, a last glance had mother in immutable calm, holding her wide-eyed lamb, ever so tight. And it was just one of those things that was serendipitous, a beautiful moment, amidst the hustle and bustle. And it goes to show that the city that we sort of take for granted at times can be quite complex. And there are moments of extreme beauty that need to be captured. And speaking of which, because Hong Kong is often depicted as an urban space, crowds, concrete, hustle and bustle. But as many of us know, there are the country parks, there are the islands, there are these peaceful places where we can go and contemplate nature and contemplate the, in general, the natural beauty of Hong Kong. And one day I took the opportunity to go to an island called Chao. And Chao is beautiful. It's relaxing. It can get quite hot in the summer, but hey, it's a lovely place. So I spent an afternoon in Chao, and this is what I felt. Pagoda's curls crown the crest of Chao, throne of the lesser pearls of the Delta, where papyrus sands, clean and dry, lace the pastel warmth of the town, brightest in summer, and grip the land to contain the steady violence of sprouting juniper blades and brush, bulbous clumps of opaque mist, newly combed, gently fleeced, complete the island to the silent approval of the Balder Hills, thrills the expanse of slate ripples seared by a slumbering sun, sprawled across its bed of sodden cotton. A flutter, a flicker, chirps, wings, leaves, and breeze. A few tufts of the dome of the bareback man laid across the branch briefly offends for the sudden breakage between the clutter I escape and the serene I attempt to embrace. But as he squints into his industrial black knocks towards the distant concrete skyline, contemplating perhaps a life of ease, I forgive and befriend fishing boats, drink copiously with tan sand dunes, and chuckle quietly with the conifer trees. Again, Hong Kong, in terms of place, is multifaceted, but it does take time to understand more and more of its facets, not just time, but effort and not a little bit of understanding. And I don't claim to definitively understand Hong Kong. I think I would have to live a couple of lifetimes to do so, but there are things that we can appreciate, definitely. But then things change, as they always do. But this sort of change, well, I don't have to spell it out, but at the same time, we have this feeling that things are irreversible. And I call this one Just Before Good Friday. Again, I place it on a train because it's almost the ubiquitous, form of transport throughout the territory. I mean, I think a lot of us, live half our lives on the train in Hong Kong, going to and fro, commuting to and from work to see friends, and so on and so forth. And it just struck me just before Good Friday in April of this year, where you felt a different energy, but I'll let the poem explain this. Before, high pierced to deep rundle, a concerto of mumble and chair, holler and blare, fill the aluminum chambers of the homebound train. A profusion of colors and tongues jostling amidst short gaps of quietude, silence between the chords. The hues of human rainbows flash and preen no less now, but it is the unseen, the unsaid, the unheard that now sing sharp and keen. In place of free-range improvisation, bold prediction, confident decision, an orchestral redirection has been inserted with precision. It speaks in waves of whistling breeze through the couplings of the railway cars in painful incisions. It is an intricate arrangement composed of closely spaced bars that even constrict pauses, the agony it causes. Just before Good Friday, there already has been sacrifice. The elaborately branded feet, clicking phones, airless chatter, merriness of manufactured ringtones, selfies richly toned, have not altered. We see these masks. These we have ceased to fear. But the shadows behind the light, the unseen, the unheard, the unsaid are what frighten us now, for these are no longer shared. I mean, change is inevitable, but some change is more equal than others. And so eventually, I mean, I'm not sure about the word expat, right? Because there are many people of different backgrounds who make a home and who become part of that home. But often, if you've come from another place, you often start to think about going home, proverbially. And this speculation is about if we went home. If and when the brambled cover of the COVID, fiercely livid, lifts off the globe, I worry about the fate of our sweet-eyed son, raised on by my wife, his mother, warm-cheeked with the smooth, dignified cacao hue of my father, if we went home. Here in Hong Kong, on its largest island, he is far from the maddened crowd, native born, but not of the soil. He is unlikely to return. In Nigeria, he'd be one more of over 200 million for show, although even his parents have been judged lost ones. The nation's bounty has overflowed, severely overrun. In Kenya, despite ancestral entreaties, 44, including South Asian ethnicities, the heirs of Uhuru may retain only this single nationality. In the Bahamas, the only proof is paternal, no allegiance through maternity. Grammy's heritage is not for prosperity. China simply rejects what it does not expect, a matter of tradition rather than respect. That leaves Canada, mine, the United States, my wife's, but we view on 24-hour news of chaos, fires, bullets, frights, panegyrics about pandemics every night. Even the true north has been set alight, with protests now a regular sight. What will become of my cheer, playful son, the one who loves his iPad, his storybots, singing along to ping pong? What would be his fate if we went home? More importantly, where would that be? And that's the thing about being multi-background, right? And especially with our kids who are, referred to as TCKs, third culture kids, or even kids who are being between cultures, where is definitely home? Because even home can change under your feet and may not be the home that you grew up and remembered in. So that's a very important thing to consider. But I'll finish, and I think, am I good for time, guys? I can do one more.
Another poem. Okay, just one more.
No, okay. I mean, I can do either way. All right, I'll do the one more. And this one is just, it goes back to an earlier one, just sort of breathing in the atmosphere of where I used to live in Kowloon City, and just feeling sort of that alternate comfort and trepidation of living in the environment. All right. And this will be my last one. and I call this one Deep Cool. I return to the deep cool, that sweet chilled breeze that wafts downward from the meadow ashen blossoms overhead, rich in soot, perspiration and ardor. It is early on a Friday, where well-worn tires begin to churn, glossy leather and torn rubber between to slap and clop onto the split sidewalks, but it is gradual, almost sedate, a procession rather than explosion, immersing the mind in a muted parade of simultaneous souls in solitude. A group of seniors by a candied-hued jungle gym, intensely focused on the graceful, disciplined arcs and flourishes of Tai Chi, each movement closely and deliberately executed to the strains of a recorded erhu, wailing its well-timed discord from a nearby boombox. Others sitting on benches on planters' edges, engaged in a life's contemplation, whatever hours or days or months they may or may not have remaining on this orb. The tropical sun, a scorching union between a topaz and a blood orange, has yet to gently roast the gray billows in the sky into cloying steam, the steel crush of vehicles that chokes the arteries of North Kowloon from mid-morning until the ink blackness of late evening has yet to appear. So the few students that appear on the streets, alone or with friends or mummy or a creaking grandma or a stoic-hued Filipino or an Indonesian helper doubling as pack mule for a privileged child, starch whites, muted blues, crisp shirts, are able to complete their journey in silence, as do I, reveling quietly in the rarity of this solemn passage, this inner pilgrimage to a spilling of the serene that bathes and cleanses and gently clears the grit of 100 days, washing the soil to distant lagoon past the temporal. Then, a last gasp, a final splash just before the office gate. Then I emerge slowly, reluctantly, but with hard eyes, prepared for the first of many bricks, scrapes, cuts, and barbs of the day. At best, the respite is but a bomb that will scorch as much as it now soothes. And that's it for my poems.
Thank you so much, Akin. Thank you. You tell us writing about Hong Kong is also an investment in Hong Kong emotionally, and also paying attention to the multifaceted aspects of Hong Kong, its transport, its different geological, geographical locations, and its people, and ultimately also you asked about the question of home, which I think is very important. Thank you so much. And next we have Felix.
All right, Felix.
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'll start by first responding to the questions that Tammy and Jennifer have so kindly sent us, and then I'll get to my poems. Okay, so the main question is that how does poetry reflect or redefine place in the cosmopolitan Hong Kong where East meets West? So the notion of Hong Kong being a place between cultures, like East meeting West, we have our colonial legacy, we have our, nationalizing the future, in the future. There's a lot to contend with, but in the realm of Hong Kong studies, people don't really like the term East meets West, because it kind of positions Hong Kong as a mix instead of its own distinct place. And that, I think, is something that I wish to challenge with my poetry and to what I write in the future. So the concept that Hong Kong is a place where East meets West kind of discounts the possibility that Hong Kong has its own qualities to offer. And I do believe that a lot of our own local references, our own local culture, are productions of Hong productions of Hong Kong instead of being, say, something from influenced by, say, the mainland or something influenced by our past. So I'm trying to like look more into those like things that we as like youngsters of my generation look into and consider parts that are definitely part of Hong Kong culture. And those will be included in the poems that I read later. Another thing that like I think poetry can do is that there is a certain poetics to orality, the way that Hong Kongers use English, be it Hong Kong English, also known as Kongish, or the frequent code switching we have in our daily conversations. And even though having a poem that is both English, like Kongish, and Cantonese might not be regarded as something that is like typically highbrow, or like people not even think it is poetry. I still think there is a poetics to the orality of the language. And funnily enough, like my inspiration for this poetics comes not from poetry itself, because let's say face it, most of the poetry written about Hong Kong or in Hong Kong does not really contain the features that I mentioned just now. It actually comes from popular music that has been produced in recent years, ranging from cantopop to actually modern rap songs produced by independent artists in Hong Kong. And I think that this orality that Hong Kong English possesses is something that can be explored in the future. So, okay, moving on to my first poem. I went to secondary school in Wan Chai, and one of like the experiences that I recall most fondly is whenever there's like we got off school early or there was a school holiday, we'd just go and play football, and we didn't even need to book the pitch, because in Hong Kong we have like this thing called Gai Cheng Wen Fa. It's like street football culture. Everybody knows what to do. Once you're there, you have enough people, you form a team, you say up next, and then you wait for your turn, and then the team who scores the next goal gets to stay, and then the team who loses gets off the pitch, and the next team goes on. So this is kind of intermixed with politics, as with a lot of my poems, because the football pitches that I mentioned are part of my childhood are actually on the protest roads in 2019. So here is Pass the Ball. Our generation caught the ball on the half turn, a hospital pass shanked somewhere by an empire fleet on fleeing. Good thing Ratanji is 5 minutes away. Morton, Victoria, Southern. The names peel off like damp sleeves. It was the route we trod that day. An age ago, on concrete green we flitted, like sparked wires, along white lines creamed by summer sun, dry winds knitting the goatlets. You wheeled away, arms stirring sunlight, appealing for imaginary offside, as the park uncles who wore jerseys with names like Bulova and Seiko watch as little bugs who knew nothing prodded ere the goal. Now the football grounds are places for assembly. Nightsticks drew, jack seams and crackheads, and we ran on Lockheed hearts clad in black jerseys, a street away from familiar fields of concrete green. Our generation caught the ball on a half turn. A hospital pass shanked sideways. The passer had a shite first touch in hands we too could not control. So this is like concrete green. Yeah, concrete green is, I think, I'm not sure what's like football pitches are in like say the UK or other places, but in Hong Kong we're used to play on concrete, and like as you can tell, we probably can't like slide tackle or dive, or like as goalkeepers dive to save the ball, because that would probably hurt. And these aspects are things that I wish to preserve like in poetry. So in a way, it's like by relating my experiences in the space, I hope to, I don't know, preserve it in some way in case like some, or relate, have like readers in different countries relate to like what playing football is like in Hong Kong. Okay, so the next poem is, let me check. Oh, okay, so this one is fun. It's called So MK. So MK culture is a subculture in Hong Kong. It's actually really loosely defined, but it's commonly slung around as an insult. So well, whole MK like sometimes we use it to joke around with our friends. So the subculture it refers to is like teenagers who engage like in materialistic behavior, such as like buying trendy clothes from name brands and doing things that attract like attention, such as like dyeing their hair really wild colors and leaving their hair long, smoking, and generally night drifting and all. So it
say a little bit about what MK stands for.
Oh yeah, MK stands for Mongkok, which is like the hub, like the central hub of Kowloon. So the reason why MK culture is called MK culture is because basically you can find everything in Mongkok, and like most of the trendy materialistic things that can be bought in Mongkok, and also MK like people like to gather in Mongkok because, as I've said, there's like many places to hang out there. So that's why it's called like Mongkok culture or MK culture. So this poem is a bit heavy on the inside references. So I think it might be helpful for me to like copy the footnotes I have to the chat box, if that's okay. Can I go and do that?
Are you going to post the whole poem or?
No, just the footnotes. Just the footnotes.
Should be fine.
Okay, this is sorry for the formatting. Okay, here goes. They sat on moorside banisters, smoking IQOS, screaming spring. Contact-covered eyes behind a greasy, fringy frame. Bright-haired street signs all bedecked with off-white fresher hoodies. Pairs of Yeezys costing half a month of part-time salary. Fuck boys, the best of them. New Way K 2 a.m. FMJs with their monthly catch sticker pics in pink machines. Enter, print out, exit scene. 吹雞搭馬撩街打, like Chan Ho Nam in movie scenes. Laugh at street gang videos where a beef ball beats a teen. So MK, a catch-all tag for Hong Kong's emo pursuers. A sight as ever present as black small and gadget stores. But Hoiting swapped her cigarettes for files and OL lace, and the fuckboys left their I-1 haunts for work in Greater Bay. Red vans killed by MTR, street art cleared in days. Sekwan bark at Xiu Fan to get out of the way. Okay, so this is a bit, okay, it's a bit in like inside to like Hong Kong culture. So I apologize for like the possible confusion that it might be caused for, like it might cause for like people who are not familiar with Hong Kong culture. But I think that like it's kind of important for us to do this, to claim subjectivity, because like if we don't treat Hong Kong culture as something that is important and distinct, and I think we should expect people from other places to know more about Hong Kong culture instead of seeing it as something low or something crass. And that goes with Hong Kong English too. It's how we speak. We shouldn't apologize to anyone for it. Like you don't see, like, I know it's like apples and oranges, but I think like say Romance speak in London, like it comes from Jamaican like Creole or Patois, right? It's getting the respect it deserves. And I hope that someday like Hong Kong English can get the respect it deserves too. Yeah, so that's the rationale behind that poem. Okay, the next one is called Trees. And this stemmed from an inside joke that I have with Louise, my partner. Yes, we always go to Sham Shui Po, and like there's this road called Tai Po Road in Sham Shui Po. Tai Po is another distinct location which is in the New Territories. So we always have this inside joke saying that like Tai Po don't my Tai Po, like Tai Po Road isn't in Tai Po, and the whole poem kind of stemmed from there. So here is the poem. It's actually,
you can walk along Tai Po Road to Tai Po.
To Tai Po, I know, but like it's funny that
I know that my husband told me that.
It ends in. I know it ends in Tai Po, but it's funny seeing the words Tai Po in Sham Shui Po. Yeah. So okay, I'll get to Trees now. Sorry for all the talk. Okay. It's the Trees is actually about another district called Dai Gok Choi, which is probably someplace you've never heard of if your understanding of Hong Kong is just like limited to the MTR map. Okay, trees. Anchored by the trunk of the West Kowloon Highway, streets split like branches, stretching for light. Near the old Dai Tong dockyards, you find walnut, willow, larch, and lime. Pine, somehow covered with fir. Fir Street, marked down as pine. So many streets are named after trees. Maybe they met up and drew straws. More likely, some white guy got bored and leafed through a bow tennis log. But imagine the pavements fighting for good names, something strong like cedar and oak. Ivy soon taken, cherry claimed fast, the shortest one settled for ash. Long maple winding, snaking its way through sycamore, willow, lychee cock road. Turning right, it carves through a boundary till it ends in a branch named Tai Po. Tai Po Road is not in Tai Po. Square street circles around. Down Fa Yun Street, no flowers are growing. On Justice Drive, can justice be found? As the MTR map would gladly remind you, districts can be mislabeled like roads. Dai Gok Zui now is only remembered as 奧運站隔離嗰度. Autumn leaves tire and slowly expire. Family shops leave like swept grass. From Nathan Road westwards, the retail train spread and skinned the streets clean of scrap bark. Mgumpo's next to Powers Palatial on shorn stumps, high rises grow. Kowloon West rising, Dai Gok Zui fallen, new trees replacing the old. Okay, so like this is about Tai Gok Zui, like a corner of Hong Kong that isn't like present, like on like, you know, the MTR map because it's like located somewhere between Nam Cheong Olympic Station and Prince Edward Station. So it's like in that like nice little triangle between those three stations. And the funny thing is that like a lot of Hong Kong roads are named after the most arbitrary things ever. Like in Kowloon Tong, there's like a bunch of roads named after counties in England. You got Suffolk Road, you got Essex Road, and so on. And like in this particular corner, the roads are all named after trees. So I think it was something nice to work on, like, you know, the imagery and all. Okay, so the next poem. Okay, we're going to take a turn. This poem, as with like a lot of my poetry, is about politics and social issues, and this is referring to like something that happened in the 2019 Hong Kong protests. It might even be called like one of the most pivotal events there. It was like the siege of Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and this is like, I don't like, one of the biggest debates about like this poem is like whether it's safe to present it, like especially in Hong Kong's current political context. But I mean, it happened. If we choose to self-censor ourselves, like regarding things like politics, then I think that we're playing into what we don't want to happen. So here it goes. This is Death by Water. November 18, 2019, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. I would rather stay far away from this campus besieged with percussion, the cries of our brethren, black keys shaped as bodies, the pounding piano of copper, cold callous rubber, the red walls exploding. I snapped a brick into two, put salt in my pocket just to feel something belong. Freedom or death. What can I claim and not say the words of death notes tucked back into bodies? Here is the loaf I ate yesterday, the rest encrusted with maggots. A canteen melts into a heaven for flies. Last night, my eyes reached for the slow trance of sleep. Gloved fingers kept it away. The soft glow of your lips shattered again. A bullet threaded through bone. The crowds are not here today. There is a child in the stairwell, in the folds of a hose, trying to shed off the blue, wrinkled skin of a snake. How does first work when water is cruel, when water is cluttered and burning? Plain, liquefied stream of black wine that runs through the shins of the crawling. In time, we shall learn to shift torsos through sewers, trudging through dampness, limbs heavy like how my mother begged me to come home. Gao man, gao man, gao man. I'm so thirsty. My fingers were reaching for maggots. The sewer holds water. Blue water is water. I pray for a manhole, some opening that leads a carcass to life. My stopper dreams are splashed with you, my love. New shells lie spent like our bodies in bed. The cannon still spray, and there are words. I'd rather stay far away in the future, absorbed from burnt water. As freedom hides from the swing of a searchlight, I drown in the thought of your tongue. Okay, so my point is this actually happened, and we shouldn't forget it. And like, even though there's nothing we can actually like do overtly right now, I think the experiences and the memory of the people that like crystallization, not only in that places like, you know, news archives, but also in its literature, and we shouldn't shy away from that. Okay, so after this one is like one of my favorite ones, like probably out of all the poems I've ever written, my favorite one, because it's just so fun. So yes,
This is going to be the last poem, right?
Yes, this is my last poem, yes. Okay, so poem 5. So context is that like I was fortunate enough to like last year actually you see there's like this mentorship program called Dear Hong Kong, and like Nicholas Wong was like acting as the mentor for that program, and there were these different sessions like Hong Kong, like Chinese short stories, English poetry, short videos, music, and so on. And we joined like the English poetry section, and actually one of my friends is also here. She's Harmony. She was also in that section, and like we did learn a lot in that session, and we got to like, you know, learn from Nick, which was really awesome. And one of the things I kind of picked on in what Nick writes is his use of Cantonese in his newest collection of poems, which is Besiege Me. And like, I mean, if someone like me or someone like people our age use Cantonese in our poems, it's kind of like not going to get the same reception or feedback that it gets if like, but if people like Nick use it. I think Arthur Long also wrote a poem incorporating elements of Hong Kong English in it. If like people with like the standing of them use Cantonese and Hong Kong English in their poems, like that opens up new possibilities over like the use of Hong Kong English as a literary language. And this is my attempt at playing with that kind of poetics. Okay, so footnotes. Okay, sorry for the wall of text. This is Dear Representations of Hong Kong. Why is it so hard to tell our own stories? P.K. Leung. 1. Our ancestors thought that the 5 elements could explain everything, as if life could be grouped into patterns. Okay, I try. Gum, as in golden days. Mok, as in wooden horse. Sui, as in flowing water. Fo, as in fire magic. Tao, as in scorched earth. 2. Okay, now I talk. 講經. What do we know of Hong Kong? Egg tarts, fish balls, and ferries. 食得㗎? An urban buffet of cliches. The first cocktail bun was made by a man wanting to save up more money. 3. If China is Ye, shouldn't Hong Kong be mum? Well, we all know what Ye will say. Now that the city has Daima makeup, let's make those slogans on walls. The place needs a facelift to make people remember. Hong Kong is Asia's world city. 4. Some people love the breathtaking photos of open umbrellas more than those who wielded them as shields. flowing water parted waves so that fire magic could make scorched earth. They say 畫面唔靚，疏鳩而禍。5. There's an Apple in Central, a Xiaomi in Mongkok, but the city can't take suspect. Snapshots of neon shop signs at night. We fucking love Hong Kong. The photos, not the city. 6. What if the city's trajectory is designed like a bus route? My coping mechanism: read the news, share the news, surrender to the news. 7. When buildings are falling apart, take nice photos of them, a way to preserve. Neon signs fade, streets disappear. Our children will never walk here. If pretty visuals could explain everything, do we try to get used to the view? Okay, so this poem, this is actually how I normally speak English to my friends, like my family, because like every time I go to like a more formal occasion, I feel there's this need to put on a more acceptable accent for consumption, and that's different from how like we banter in English, how like my other friends like talk in English. So this is usually the way that we talk in English. And another thing that's mentioned in the poem is like this overwhelming envy that we have about the city, this overwhelming sense of helplessness, and like we don't know where to go after 2019, because like as we know now, potentially the Hong Kong diaspora is getting bigger and bigger, maybe even more so than, I don't know, the Hong Kong local population as we know it. And like at this moment, I think that a lot of people are trying to remember the city, and like most cultural production about the city nowadays is to record its culture and to present like how special it is, how good it is. But the more I think about Hong Kong, I think there are things to like, there are things to not like. And I don't think like, although we have like really strong feelings for Hong Kong, romanticizing it is like the only way that we can keep it alive in the future. It's not some heavenly place that we aspire to go back to in the future. There are bad things about Hong Kong too. And I think to do it justice, we need to remember both things and keep ourselves not that positive about the place. Because like even though nationalism has been rising in Hong Kong in the past, we keep on thinking like, oh, Hong Kongers are really, you know, special, like maybe even call it Hong Kong exceptionalism, but Hong Kong isn't that perfect. And I think we should remember it that way, even though we all really love the place. I think that does it more justice than making it like just a pretty image for us to look back upon, because it's home. Home doesn't have to be perfect. Whew, okay, that was.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Felix. So you have reminded us of the importance of incorporating local Hong Kong slangs, expressions, and elements in poetry, portraying Hong Kong, and also the importance to also think about politics in our poetry. And I love your footnotes. They are so meticulously done. At the same time, I feel a little bit ambivalent about them, because they are still done to urge the understanding of general Anglophone speakers or readers. So that's something we can think further. And next we have Marco.
Hi everyone, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so just wanted to say one thing about Felix's poems. Like I just really love the emotion, the rage, this voice is like what we need to, as Felix said, to preserve what we have lived through. So thank you, Felix. So For me, the questions of what this place really is, or what Hong Kong really is, or how do we make sense of this place? Basically, for me, I think it's, well, for me personally, a place is not a place without a person interacting and making sense of it. Like, what I think we do as poets is to try to assign meanings to this live thing, this living place that we are in. And for Hong Kong, what kind of city Hong Kong is for me is that it is filled with possibilities. So I think a lot of people would just understand Hong Kong as a built space. And I think Akin also mentioned that how there's nature there. And that's what I want to share as well, is that there's just a lot of open space and greenery here in Hong Kong as well. And I think what really make this place really unique is the possibility and how it contains a multitude. So like you can have access to everything pretty easily. So now onto my poem. So I've just picked up some poems, and then I was just thinking about what poems to read that can represent this place. And then I've decided it, and I just realized that, oh, actually, like I'm doing this with a, I'm picking this with a post-COVID mentality. I don't know whether I can call it like post-COVID, but still, like it's a mentality that's influenced by COVID. I'm thinking about the internal space and also the external space here in Hong Kong, and also nature in Hong Kong. I'm also thinking about there's the resistance to progress, and then also the calmness and the well-being of the mind, and also pleasure, and also seeing some good in the bad. So these are the I think this batch of poems I'm going to read is going to talk about that. So the first poem that I read is called Bruised Jasmine. So personally, I live in Mongkok, and Mongkok, which is very close to at the flower market. And I've gained this habit of buying cut flowers from flowers market and put it in my apartment. But then I think everyone has experienced that before, is the worst thing about getting cut flower is to getting rid the wither flowers, like the mess of it. So this is about that, and also retracing retracing of the steps to the first urge of getting that flower. So to sort of like the retracing or step back to life, something like that. So this is Bruised Jasmines. Bruised jasmines, how not to blame them. Before casting the pink mess to the kitchen rod, which now flowers, I pull out the softened stems, the slime, other impurities. I have numbered the days of withering disguised as fluorescence. Those nights I leaned in, inhaled, if only innocence was a scent. I remember settling the fresh bouquet in tepid water, tossing a nickel into the makeshift vase, a coppery wish for microbes not to grow. Good things should stay on the verge of festering. Half naked by the sink, I sweated through the afternoon, pruning the parts we didn't need to be beautiful. When I brought them home from the florists, they had so many leaves. Green havoc, green lineography on a plastic wrap they'd corded. It was Sunday, a casual walk after lust, after all the crumbs had been picked, the way back no longer visible. But I wanted to see some signifiers of life on display. The street, unevenly paved, flanked with plants, a series of thresholds. I crossed each of them thinking I was unchanged. In the transactions of cash and cut flowers, the vendors hollered, and I chose those quiet flames to burn in my room. Allure, yes, ambivalence too, then gradually grace for days. And the second poem is actually is echoing what Felix said about like taking picture of a thing is definitely not the thing itself. So this is a firsthand experience that I have hiking, like not really a hike, but in a walk around Victoria Peak and then encounter a wild boar, and how people react to it, and how somehow it's also a reflection on how we Hong Kongers or we people have made this place such a, you know, such a hostile place for other living, for other animals that share the space with us. So a little bit, yeah, it's a reflection on how we deal with wildlife here. So this poem is a file name. It's called boar.jpg. So boar.jpg. August, Victoria Peak, sky full of rosebuds, the evening has coaxed into unfurling. We walk with such privilege along a well-paved trail, a boar sauntering by our side. No haste, no excitable in the air, just a primal being at ease with his patch of ferns, lush in the cityscape. She struts, every step electric and yet poised, almost regal. The joggers slow down, recede, or lean on the other side. Fear and respect, two sides of a coin twirling before the head and tail of her eminence. Heiress of mochas, mirror image of the Erymanthian boar. She blesses and fouls the concrete floor all at once. How dutifully we follow, we the worshippers, we the offerings, we the unworthy dust her hooves set free, dust dirtying the red sky. So the trail ends, opening to a plaza enclosed by malls and a visitor center, and she deflates into an animal, head dimmed, her short snout dulled, lured by the sweet of ripened trash. She treads lightly and knocks over the bin out of instinct or habit, who knows? Rummaging through the black plastic bag, she gorges on the leftover fries methodically, licks clean the last smear of ketchup, swallows the napkin soddened by phlegm and the soft of a used face mask. Now with a full stomach, mortal, now an attraction being photographed by equally mortal men. She appears smaller on smartphone screens. Pictures from this angle, pictures to be shared, to be forgotten. Look, a wild boar captured. What have we done? And this poem, it's the upcoming poem. It's sort of like I don't know. It's a kind of resignation, and there's also a pessimistic view about progress and about what happened in the past year, in the past 2 years here in Hong Kong, and whether, yeah, it's sort of like I don't know. It sounds like pessimistic to me, but then it's also another mentality to approach the idea of progress, like whether it is something that we still value. Okay, so it's called Arrows. And the funny thing about, if anyone's interested in art, okay, I think before we started this reading, and then some poet like Akin was saying something about arts, and the ending of this poem is actually inspired by a piece by Keith Tyson, a British artist. And the piece is called, like, it's a piece with a lot of stars in it, and then it's called 29 December 2001, somewhere near the edge of the visible universe. So maybe later I can put up on the link. Okay, so this poem is called Arrows. Arrows. On a balcony in a city burnt, to a hunting ground, about to be burning again. I see my people and all the arrows we arduously follow, so many pointed hits in green and yellow directions everywhere, in train stations, bus stops, pedestrians' ways, so much muscle locked in cows and feet dedicated to the stream rushing forward. All the right moves, not enough false steps, not enough stop signs or room for U-turns, or rivers who climb upstream, cutting back to their source where mistakes are still open to unmaking. Remember Jay Gatsby, who thinks his star will go on with a luminous streak, which seems to last forever. If only we pause to look back and feel happiness, so many waking hours, so many bull's eyes to hit in this arena, this ruin, all these men holding the darts, so many compasses pointing north, the winds all austere and no Aquilo, so many expectations on the fire ahead, when each of us is a blind bug with a desire to combust and mark the air. Not enough tethers, not enough mischief or trepidation, or simply not drunk enough. Not enough benevolent stars in the deep, swampy night of June to constellate and deliver the cosmic caution. Go no further, turn back now. So I've one very personal poem that I wrote very recently, and it's 3 poems for a lover, and then it's dealing with the inside space and also the outdoor. And then Akin read a poem about Chen Chao, and then one part of this poem is actually set in Chen Chao as well. So it's yeah, it celebrates the heat here in Hong Kong, and also like all the nature, the lushness of greens that this place also offers, and how this is not only a built space and not only the buildings along the Victoria Harbour. So I was being very lazy with the title of this one, so I just named this 3 Poems for G. 3 Poems for G. When the birds trill and the plea to enter pierces the drone of the air conditioner, the sun's sweep gives shape to our room where objects are real again. One of us holds on to dreams. One of us wonders about the caterpillar we keep among the cut geraniums, its mandibles, the curvature of its appetite. On which bloom did it heedlessly feast? Later, in the fervor of flowers, the day beginning, one of us will look for a gem, for a small promise of light, unaware of the green body floating in the vase water. Mid-hike, in the ambit of heat and humidity, and 2 mosquitoes mating mid-air, seemingly devouring each other, we stop to admire how air vibrates and suspends the black smudge the insects have become, their second metamorphosis. A semicolon slick in the center of these woods, silence where we equilibrate and slake our thirst, side by side, mind by mind. Once, at summer's edge, we strolled along the east side of a tombolo, sea breezes seasoning our skin, our hair dark, gleaming as youth. On the island, harsh rocks, sharp flowers, tangles of vines. There were a lot of butterflies. There were a lot of spiders eating butterflies. Whenever a bush stirred, I squeezed your hand, then you would squeeze mine. Okay, so am I good with time? I forgot to turn on my timer, so one last poem.
One last.
Is it good? Okay, so hold on, sorry, my earphone just died. Sorry. Okay. So one last poem, and this is about the heat in Hong Kong. So one thing that I think with COVID, then everybody's gonna stay put here in Hong Kong, and you gotta feel the heat here in the summer. So this is in a way celebrated, and also yeah, it's celebrating it, I'm sure. So it's called Midsummer. So Midsummer, pale sky, high clouds, the heat soaks into the concrete, making shadows out of everything. It's the establishment of summer again. The city open to light and humidity, see the dust, gnats, pollen, tinsels of pollution, sweat on my arm, coursing through the hair, almost the winding coastline where my brother and I swam and paddled as dogs, swallowing brine, small stones, our own piss, our mouths embittered, only to spit at each other's face, the length of the shore measured by the clams we picked, then dropped into the blue bucket. We laid the shells on charcoals at night, watched them crackle, their meat dead and full of sand, the sand of another beach where my childhood friends and I dug with our hands, nails collecting grains, a pit to bury driftwood, crabs and soda cans, a treasure chest we made no map, wouldn't uncover it even if we stood on the X one more time. We shouldn't ask for the keepsakes we've gifted to the land. Let the land remember us. Let it remember for us, because I can't return to the afternoon when the girl I like laid next to me, the damp towels, the fearful sun, the angst of not knowing how to talk without leaving a clue of what I wanted. We ran to the waves and sank ourselves so we could touch. Spume clinging to our skin, a straight jacket of salt. We struggled to strip off. It was sticky. It was bliss, eternally thick on these bodies of ours. Dear brother, dear friends, my dearest girl, here we are. Look how much we've perspired. On this day, there are things we can't wash off, can we? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marco.
Thank you.
You talked about the heat in some of Hong Kong, the post-COVID situation. Hong Kong is not really post, but Warren, you have just shown us that you're an expert command of language, of words. Marco is a contributor to the very first issue of Chao in
that was a long time ago.
in 2007. That was 14 years ago. You need to have your poetry collection out, man.
I'm working on it.
Do that, yes. And next we have Kate.
I'm unmuting myself. Hi. It's such a privilege to be here, and you are all a very hard act to follow. And I feel quite emotional, which I often do about Hong Kong. So I will come back to that with by sharing a link to a poem that I did not include in the reading tonight, but I will include it as a link later near the end of my set. Anyway, Tammy's posed some questions for us to consider. How does poetry reflect a redefined place in a cosmopolitan Hong Kong where East meets West? I agree with Felix in that I think that framing of Hong Kong is probably no longer, I wouldn't say relevant, but I would say perhaps it's a false framing, and it ignores the complexity of Hong Kong, which I found to be a very contradictory, very rich, very intense place to live. I will say my poetry about Hong Kong is among my most emotional, most intense poems. I now live in Canada, so, you know, I need to put that up front. I came back to live in Canada after being in Hong Kong for 20 years. And I came here in December of 2019. And I would say that Hong Kong is still more home than Canada. So since I grew up here, that's, I think, a pretty revealing statement. My latest collection, most recent collection of poetry is called Out of Place. And for many years, I experienced being out of place in Hong Kong, not belonging. That collection also refers to my mother's family, who were Ukrainian immigrants to Canada, and how they felt out of place. But I think ironically, just before I left Hong Kong, I felt like I belonged. So that's something I grapple with often, and I grapple with in my poetry. And I think I became a local by being active in the writing community, active in protests, and as an educator in the tertiary level sector, listening to Felix's poems in particular was heartbreaking, and I was full of awe for his courage. So the poems I'm going to read will start out with more impressions of how I negotiated identity, I suppose, through food and other things like that. And then gradually I will face more difficult questions about Hong Kong. So the first poem is called At the Dai Pai Dong. And for those of you who don't know, a Dai Pai Dong is like what we would call in North America a greasy spoon, or an outdoor comfort food diner. And there's some Ukrainian terms in it, pierogies, which are like dumplings, and Canadians, as Akin knows, love their pierogies, especially in winter. And cabbage rolls are holopchi. So anyway, I'll read the poem. At the Dai Pai Dong. Noodles bite me back with garlic and chili, singe my palate. Take that, yearning tongue, they whisper as they slither by. Dumplings fold plump hands in their laps. At night, I dream of pinching shut the gaping mouths of pierogies, stuffed not with pork and leek, but cheese curds and sauerkraut. They dive into boiling water to do somersaults. Chao Fan could easily fill cabbage rolls, those holopchi my mother made to line my winter stomach. Char siu is as sweet as the crackling on her pork roast. If she were here, she'd say, don't talk with your mouth full. It isn't clear which language you are speaking. She grips English syllables carefully between her teeth, enunciates each morsel of sound. The instrument I hold by the throat in Tom Lee music looks like an erhu, but could have been a mandolin. There may be 8 tones or 9. In Cantonese, words are sung more than said. Mother didn't want me to learn the language of her childhood. In Ukrainian, my only phrase is, "Я не знаю," I don't know. The next poem is also about language in a very literal sense. And I really believe identity and language are so intertwined that we can't ignore that connection. So as I was trying to belong in Hong Kong, I struggled for many years to try to learn Cantonese. I think Akin claimed that he knows basic Cantonese. I think Akin, your Cantonese is better than that, but certainly mine is basic. Anyway, this is on my way to Cantonese class. I pass under century-old banyans on Nathan Road, scaly bark, fern-studded, trunks leaning on iron frames. I weave among shoppers, all of us ducking the rain of myriad air conditioners. Mhoyisi, excuse me, I mutter as an old lady with gray bun elbows past. After 20 years in Hong Kong, taking sporadic Cantonese classes, garbage is lap sap. The fermenting fusion of durian, chow fan, and chicken wings smells the same in any language. Yet I long to uncover more layers of Hong Kong's midden heap. In class, I ask too many questions. The teacher is kind, but I stall the lesson. The blonde Brit next to me taps his foot in irritation. Mho lam gam do. Don't think too much, the teacher writes on the whiteboard in both languages. Memorize the measure words with each noun. Test next week. Sweat beads on my upper lip. Such hard work as my memory gapes like a sinkhole in an old district, exposing tree roots, shards of blue and white porcelain. Will I pass? I do mix up measure words, go and boy, bowls and cups. After class, I wait at the red light. A gangly young girl in a pink tutu, pink tights, matching Nikes on wheels, flashing hazard lights on her heels, pushes past me to cross. Mhoyisi, excuse me, she says. So polite. Siu Sum, I call. Be careful. She pauses at the traffic island, takes my advice without glancing at my face to see who warns her. A number of people, I think all the other poets today have mentioned Hong Kong's green space, and I did a tremendous amount of hiking and lived on Lantau Island for much of my time in Hong Kong, and could hike just by walking out the door. Anyway, this next poem is set on Lama Island, one of the many islands that makes up Hong Kong, and it also features a wonderful local dessert made from tofu, tofu fa. On the broken trail to Motat, a field of white ginger lilies flags us down. We shrug off our packs. Huddled among ruins to our left, a stone house, red clay roof sloping, doorway gaping like an old man sleeping. We sit at a plank table beside a wriggly tin shed, casting shade on wooden tubs of tofu. A tiny woman with a toothless smile, trembling blue-veined hands, carries a tray. Tofu fa is heaped like soft snow in turquoise plastic bowls. I love the tofu smooth surface and crave the golden sugar pocking its face, tofu puddled in ginger syrup, its sharp scent clearing my nostrils. Dusk creeps under our table. A gray dog dozes in the first moonlight. So my second last poem, I have a lot to say about the last one, so I'm moving through the poems fairly quickly. My second last poem uses an epigraph of an idiom, which is kind of a euphemism, really, from Cantonese, something that colleagues taught me when I was first teaching in Hong Kong. And it explains why this poem is called Menstruation Song. And the epigraph goes, in Cantonese, women tell each other, Ima Lai Dong, my great aunt is visiting. In other words, my period is here. My great aunt rarely visits these days, but she found me in Sichuan, halfway up the slope of Ermeishan, with 4 other women. Great aunt beckoned a monkey to leap out of his leaf nest in the camphor tree onto my backpack with the bag of apples. The monkey bared his fangs when we shouted and waved our arms. He lifted the pack flap and grabbed 2 apples. Later, a raven sauntered into the women's toilet in the monastery garden as I squatted over the stone hole. He plucked my used pad from the bin, ambled outside, scattered scarlet petals of its blown blossom on the breeze. Great aunt has retired since that climb, but sends notes in the beak of a dark bird. The stain of her sunset returns after an afternoon of love. So my last poem is probably my most political poem of this set. I have written a lot of political poetry about Hong Kong. And to be very honest, transparent, I was unsure about sharing it because in Canada, we are acutely aware of the political situation in Hong Kong, and not just those of us who have connections to Hong Kong, direct connections. So I didn't want to put anyone in a difficult or dangerous situation. So this poem is called The Meaning of Leaving. It has been inspired by a very beautiful, powerful poem by Bei Dao, the dissident Chinese poet. The poem he wrote is called Requiem, and it's about the victims of the Tiananmen Square protests in Beijing in 1989. I should tell you a couple of other things about this poem, and then towards the end, I will put in a link to probably the first political poem I wrote, and that Chao was very supportive about. They published it, they featured the poem as the title in a reading that was organized by Tammy and by a local bookstore. And I didn't want to read it tonight, the other poem called The Borrowed Children, because I knew that I would weep. So I'm going to read this one, which is far more new, far more recent. And the only other thing you need to know about this poem, I have a reference to a Canadian cultural icon, which is Inukshut. That's the plural for Inuksut, which is a stone sculpture. It was originally crafted by Inuit hunters in the Arctic. And it actually looks remarkably like the character Ren, the symbol of being human. Nowadays, settlers, people like me, whose families came to settle from various parts of Europe and then all around the world in Canada, settlers tend to build these stone sculptures, and some Indigenous people in Canada feel that that's appropriation. So I felt that's important to share. Okay, so I will now read you The Meaning of Leaving, and this is my last poem. It starts with the epigraph from Bei Dao. The wave of that year flooded the sands on the mirror. To be lost is a kind of leaving, and the meaning of leaving, the instant when all languages are like shadows cast from the west. And this is a glossa, by the way, so it borrows the first and last lines from Beidao's stanza. The wave of that year hurled me back to the country of my birth. I swim the old lake, back crawl into chop, suddenly swamped by a memory of buoyancy in the South China Sea. Chung-Sha Beach sticks to my skin, salty ear. Along the shores of Algonquin's lakes, Inukshuk sculptures, settler stacked. Motorboat oil slicks the water, flooded the sands on the mirror. To be lost is a kind of leaving, an echoing departure, train smoking in the rock-blasted tunnel. Hong Kong mountain cliffs, skirting the edges, scattering rubble. Believing in my right to walk there, not looking where it fell. Tripping, always clumsy, on the stones and the meaning of leaving. The instant when all languages opened their mouths in my class, I glimpsed the heart of Hong Kong. I hold the door open for students in dreams, even today. Bound by bandages, they climb a precipice. Falling is safer than waiting. Their lithe silhouettes are like shadows cast from the west. Thank you. And I will put my link to the poem.
Thank you so much, Kate.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your poems of Cantonese food in Hong Kong, and your poem about Yi Ma Lai Do. It's too sexy for us. It's very sexy. Thank you also for sharing with us the meaning of leaving. It's a wonderful poem. Thank you. I asked our poets to share with us their work, 15 minutes. None of them obeyed me. They're very rebellious. I think we actually have reached the end time of our session, but I asked them to comment on each other's work, and I also would like to know about audience response to our poets. So I don't know what I should do. Jenny?
Feel free to ask them if I guess if anyone has any question, or
I want
can you
to
read the poem as well?
I want to know our poets, their response to each other's work. I know Marco is absolutely enough with Felix poetry. You have already commented on that.
I love trees. I want to talk about trees. It's so it's I don't know, craft wise, because I have this with me as well. I have the markup copy. I like pointed out where I like, and then yeah, I just, in general, I'm not sure that the audience have it, but then if you remember, it's about the name of the streets and how they were called, how they're named after trees, right? So it's actually a neighborhood very close to where I'm living right now. But what's amazing in general, I think there is a very subtle sadness in it, and also the play on words, this poem is called Tree, and then there are the street names after trees, but then there's practically no trees, no greens in this poem if you read it like literally. Like, I think that's amazing, and that also informs us the importance of naming things, like how a name can make and also unmake a place. Because in the end, at the end of the poem, it was saying like Taikotchoy, this neighborhood was almost renamed by the MTR station called Olympics, and how it is also now known as like the Kowloon West district. So, and how like, you know, renaming that place is also like destroying it at the same time. So I think that's a very, I don't know, a valid point to make, and done in a very smart way, I would say. So there's, yeah, like what ultimately I think I could say what amazes me, it's how this poem is all about trees, but then there's literally no tree here. So
great, thank you, Marco. Akin, would you like to comment on one of the other speakers?
Of course. In fact, I have Kate Rogers on my way to Cantonese class, because I mean, here's the thing that we sometimes take for granted with language. If it's the one that we, you know, or if these are the languages we grew up with or we learned early in our youth. I mean, problem with a guy like me is that I've lived in many countries and I've forgotten more languages than I can count, right? Because as they say, you don't use it, you lose it. And the thing is, trying to handle Cantonese, people forget, you know what? One thing that saved me with Cantonese, my father's language is a highly tonal language with about 9, 10 tones, etc. So when I heard Cantonese, I said, okay, this idea is familiar. You just, you know what, alter the tone for the same basic, you know, seeming word, and you might get somewhere. But it's this sort of engagement when you come here as an adult and you have to engage, because I'm going to say it right out, right here. The first and foremost language of Hong Kong is Cantonese. No ifs, ands, or buts, okay? It is the language of Hong Kong. English, well, it's for, you know, talking with the world in general. Putonghua is for talking with Greater China, and that includes, you know, Macau, Taiwan, the mainland, and Singapore to a certain extent, but Cantonese is the language of Hong Kong. And I could empathize with Kate because, I mean, Cantonese is also one of those languages where, I mean, goodness, you actually have to go sit down and study. You're not just going to pick it up by ear and pick it up on the street, because it has certain features. It's a very rich language, a very colorful language. And I found it's one of the oldest you know, Chinese languages, you know, with a very rich literature, but you have to go sit and study. And even, you know, you can even tell the difference, you know, as Kate did, between, let's say, English speaking Hong Kongers who they'll hear your bad Cantonese and say, okay, I think I know what you're trying to say. And Cantonese speaking, you know, Cantonese speakers who are saying, what is this person trying to say? So that sort of struggle, and I mean, goodness, you know, when your tones don't come out right, you could feel it, but when they come together and you're saying it, where somebody just accepts it, that's another Hong Konger, and they just respond to your sort of, you know, engagement with the language. And I thought, you know, this poem was brilliant because to a certain extent, those of us who didn't start out as Hong Kongers know this is one of the steps that we must take to become more of a part of Hong Kong. So yes, I definitely love On My Way to Cantonese class.
Thank you. I still dream in Cantonese.
Well, I get, you know, Cantonese every day. I'm a teacher, so, yes, you know, especially some of my little kids will speak to me in Cantonese. I just respond in English because I'm their English teacher. I'm supposed to do this, you know, but it is a lovely engagement, you know, in language.
Yes.
Thank you, Akin.
Let me say one quick thing.
Yes.
And that's why I especially love what Felix does when he incorporates Cantonese and incorporates Kongish into his work, because that really just screams authenticity, you know, the real living language that you hear, you know, in the streets of MK, you know, streets of Wan Chai. Keep on doing what you're doing, Felix. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to embarrass you, bro, but I love what you do. Just
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Kate, I would like to know one other poet's work you would like to comment on.
It's hard to choose just one. I really enjoyed the work of everyone, but I think the poems that affected me at a visceral level were read by Felix. And Felix, I think it's called Be Water or Water, the poem set at the Hong Kong PolyU campus.
Death by Water.
Yes, Death by Water, that's right. I read it on the page before this session, and then as I was listening to you, I felt that the very visceral response I've had to the protests, and you really, it felt like all of the violence, but I don't like using that word because it's been misused to describe the protests by authorities who oppose the protests, but the tremendous intensity of the feelings that were expressed by the protesters really came through in your poem. It's such a powerful evocation of that day. I was in the area. I was not actually there, but I was quite close by when that was going on, and a couple of times actually during that period. And it was a very powerful act of resistance, and very, very moving. So I thought your poem captured that so beautifully, and I'm really glad you're writing that kind of poetry. And I think you could be another PK Leung. Oh, Tammy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay.
Felix?
Yeah, okay. One poet only, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll go with Akin. I'm sorry, Michael. Yes. Okay, because it's one poet. Okay, so Akin, like when I first read like all the poems that we collected before like the reading, like really struck me to see like the depth of your experiences in Hong Kong. And you say you've been here for like 16 years, right? 16. Yeah. Okay. The thing that is something that is usually brandished by like say expatriates as a sign of how acquainted they are with like Hong Kong. Say that, oh, I've been here for 30 years, don't question me, or like on this, like, stuff like that. But I was really like touched, be surprised, see like struck by the content and the amount of detail in your poems, because of course these come from personal experiences, and I was really surprised to see the light rail take precedence in one of the like poems. I think it was the brother and sister poem. And I think that while me and my friends, we like to like laugh about right, like Hong Kong writing like in English, not a lot of this really feels like Hong Kong writing in English, but I feel like an immense amount of respect for like people like you yourself and Kate for having an awareness of where your position, not something that someone that like really insisted they are part, like are like really local, but at the same time having a real appreciation of the place. I mean, like this extends to Kate too, because at least you bothered to learn Cantonese, which isn't exactly the easiest language to learn. So I think that if I take your poems, the degree of craft notwithstanding, the detail can be written by someone who like, I don't know, like experiences life in the area, because of course you did. So I really appreciate those poems.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Felix. And I think the thing of it, if I can say just something very quick, is that to be a poet is to be an observer, but not just an impassive observer, because you live, amongst your neighbors, your colleagues, in Kate's and my cases, our students.
Yes.
And the thing is, you come to the conclusion, people are people. The way we differ is often in terms of how we developed culture, how we developed language, how we came to the conclusions we have through history. But people are people. And, reaching out to understand, you know, where we live and who, you know, who we live with is all important. You know, it's that sense of empathy, right? Because how else can we understand each other if not by empathy?
Yes.
And this is the essential thing. You know, we would be remiss in our duty, in a sense, as poets, if we couldn't do that, you know? But you know, what I love about yours, and I love yours too, Marco, you know, I just want to say, because it's balance. You want to see a larger picture, a broader picture. Marco, you know, you see nature and you see, you know, the human society, the political aspect, Felix. But that sort of balance creates a fuller picture. And that's, in the end, what I think all poets should strive to do, you know? So in return, I appreciate you, Felix, and I appreciate you, Marco, and I appreciate you, Kate. Okay, I appreciate you all. Sorry, Tammy, did I hijack that a little bit?
No, don't worry about that. We are seriously running out of time, but I would still like to have a couple of questions from the audience, if you have any. If you would like to comment or ask a question, please use the microphone. Because I see that there are so many messages there. I cannot catch up. Does anyone want to say something, comment, question?
Marco, do you want to answer that first, or should I go first?
Yeah, that's from Jennifer, right? So no, like from, okay, yeah, it's fine. Go for it.
Yeah, okay. Overtly political, yes. Yeah, definitely. So I'm actually typing out like a direct message to Marco in the comments right now. So because this is about his poems and the way that he presents his themes, I was originally going to talk about that like in the comments, but since it's related, I say it now. So I really like how like Marco's poems, not just this, but I think there are two other poems that like there's one called After the Code, the other is kind of like John Who Wears Black. They're political by theme, but they're not political like in the sense that it's not very in your face, but the profound impact behind them is like kind of like delivered through his craft. And I feel like that's something I aspire to doing. And as for myself, I think I'm very direct in what I say about Hong Kong. It's like directly thoughts to page kind of, you know, feeling. So what does that translate to in what Hong Kong means to me? It's home. That's like something that people throw around a lot, but I really love this place. And I feel like if I look around and nobody's saying these things in poetry, then I do try my hand at it and present what I think needs to be included in Hong Kong's literary corpus. So that's the main motivation I do have when I come across something it's interesting, I write a poem about. It's more of a hobby than something that's serious for me right now. I'm not like completely serious about poetry right now, but I do try to play along with the possibilities that Cantonese and English give me. Yeah.
Marco?
Yeah, for me, I think I think it also matters on to the batch of poems that we have chosen for today. And I think Tammy will have heard some of my really like kind of like angry really angry poems. But then I think yes, we have, I think for writer, and given the last 2 or 3 years have given us a lot of materials to write about. And I think this will open another whole lot of discussion, is that we can write whatever we want, but then in this climate, what kind of things can we put out? Like what are the poems that we can read during readings, or what are the poems that we are going to submit. I think that with the political climate right now, or with the national security law, I think that in a way that hinders us a little bit. So I mean, it won't affect our writing. I would not say it will affect our writing, because still at the end of the day, we are writing whatever we want. We can be overtly political, but then I think there is also, after writing that poems, or like whatever writing that we have accomplished in terms of like whether it is like a direct attack to the regime here, or like what, and ultimately, and then that there is a decision before what to publish, or what to send out, or what to share. I think that's another, like, decision to make. So I think that, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, let me just add one sentence. I think it's because I'm relatively younger and I don't think things more clear.
I don't think that's the case, because there are situations, this is something that I could share with you. There's a poem that I wrote about protests, and then it is published in Australia in Cordite Poetry Review. And I think Tammy helped curated that, and then, or organized that, you remember? And then that's about the protest, and after the national security law, and then the publisher, the magazine editor, they did send me an email and asked me whether I want to take it down. Like, they asked. Yeah. They asked, and they
didn't write anything to me.
Because it is sensitive after that law, and who knows what they will do, right? So and then and
what do you say?
That time, I think in print, I would say just keep it on, I'm okay with that. If they are going to prosecute me for, that's what I'm thinking. I'm being very passive aggressive in that regard, is that if they are going to prosecute me because I wrote this little poem, then I'm going to make the news. Right, I'm going to be very loud, and so, but then ultimately, when I'm asked to like do this reading, and then like what kind of poems, and I do have that little whisper in my head, like how like, should I read this, should I read that, like what should I choose? It's not necessarily the thing to direct my decision, but then still there is a little whisper, like whether it is safe, whether it is good, or who will be listening, who will be reading. So that's the world that we're living in right now. So I don't know. Like, I think that's a question that every one of us here, as writer or as people who put out poems, and to think about as well. Yeah.
Do we have another question or comment from the audience? Little Whisper in My Head could be a title for a collection.
Well, it's another name for self-censorship, so
anyone wants to answer the displacement question? It's in the chat.
Jenny, do you?
Jenny? Only if you do you want to answer the displacement question first, and then
yeah, sure. If nobody wants to answer them before me. Displacement, because like I think 2014, 2019 served as like the political awakening for a lot of young people, or even like just basically anyone in Hong Kong. I don't really have like this sense of, oh, this isn't home anymore, because we never really got to experience it as adults, right? Like, say, like I was like 19 when 19 happened. So I'd say like as an adult living in Hong Kong, this is the norm. It's a sad thing, but it's the norm. So I don't really feel like, oh, it's not home anymore, I want to move elsewhere, or anything like that in comparison to like previous generations. As for reconciliation, as in like, how do I come to terms with myself and that, I think that's a pretty dangerous thing to aspire to. Once you find reconciliation about what's happening in the Hong Kong, it's like, in a way, not being affected by it that much. And I don't really want to get to that stage. Actually, if like you're asking about how I come to terms with this, I don't, but like writing poetry is a good outlet to do something productive instead of like just be feeling sad or feeling angry about the entire situation. At least I think, I hope it is something productive.
Jenny, you want to respond?
Oh yeah, so I actually it's a bit linked to this question as well, as in like, do you find that like so I can see, for example, Marco, okay, all of your poems kind of describe have different feelings and about Hong Kong, or allude to different moments in time, and do you find like after what happened, like it's very difficult to process the feelings of being able to translate it into actual words to kind of fully encapsulate what you experience in and are there ways for you to kind of how do you write about hope, and how do you write thinking about responsibility? Is that a responsibility, or do you feel like how do you feel like that weight of history, like I don't know, like
Yeah, like I think I get sometimes I get this too, like whether my poem, like I did write some poems that's directly related to like what happened and what happened, or how is it like the memory of being here, like the history of here, or my personal history of being here. But then it's you can I would like to hope that as poets we will be able to write more than like we will be able to be more diverse in terms of the things that we're writing. And even in like what Felix was saying about like one of my poem After the Code and the Code, like it's that given that context, like what is the product? Like, do I have to, well, sometimes I may not have to spell everything out. And this is the, the miasma that we're living in, and like how we approach things will be totally different. So I think on the one hand, it's okay. I think it's useful to have some certain like direct poems, like really tackling the issues, but at the same time, yeah, and you can have, there is a real life that you are living as well. I think for a poet, like, and you should live multiple lives, and you should have multiple minds to like multiple obsessions, I would say. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's the end of our panel. Thank you so much for our poets, Akin, Felix, Marco, and Kate, for your reading and sharing, and also for our audience members to stay and also to reflect on the discussion. And thank you, Jenny, and the team of Poetics of Home Festival for having this wonderful week-long event. It's a great achievement. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.